So thank you all for being here. Dr. Middleton is a PhD, is a professor at the Educational Psychology and a chair of the Department of Human Development and Psychoeducational Studies at Howard University, where she teaches statistics and measurement courses and serves as a primary methodologist for the school and sits on numerous university-wide committees. She also serves on the Executive Council for the National Alliance for Doctoral Studies in Mathematical Sciences, and her research focuses on ensuring validity, equity, and fairness for all students, as well as increasing the number of underrepresented minorities in the STEM fields. She's received her MA, her master's and PhD in educational measurement and statistics from the University of Iowa, and her BS in mathematical sciences from Florida Agricultural and Mechanical University. She's a native of Walterboro, South Carolina, and a proud graduate from HBCU. And she also serves as a higher education committee chair for the DC Metro HBCU Alumni Alliance. And in her spare time, she enjoys playing sports, running, and traveling and baking. So I'll turn it over to you, Dr. Middleton.
All right. Thank you, Rose. So we're going to go ahead and get started. Myself as well as Banji are going to be presenting today. So I'm going to go ahead and share my screen, and then Banji, I'm going to let you introduce yourself. Well, actually, I'll let you introduce yourself now.
Yeah, thank you, everyone. Good afternoon. My name is Ferdinand Banji Kumalalo. I'm a third-year doctoral student in the psychometry program at Morgan State University. My research interests actually focused on culturally responsive environments. Thank you.
All right. Thank you. All right. So let me try to put this in presenter view. My computer is not cooperating. Okay, there we go. All right, so today we're going to talk about an examination of United States item writer characteristics. So Banji and I have been working on this project for a little over a year, maybe a year and a few months, because we both felt that, like now with the, and I'm not going to get too much into it because I think that's Banji's next slide, but with the kind of push towards culturally relevant assessments and items, we felt that there was an area that has not been looked at much, and that is the item writers. And, we think that it's important to look at them because, they're the ones who are creating the items. So we decided to kind of collect some empirical data on item writer characteristics. So this is definitely an exploratory study. So keep that in mind. But these are the preliminary results.
Yeah, once again, good afternoon. This afternoon, I'll be presenting the first part of this presentation, and I will go, straight to the background of the study. Currently, there's been very little data or research on item writing, and especially on item writers' characteristics. And because items are actually developed to provide a measure to assess test takers on what they have learned, it is important that every item that's being developed or being written is fair, is responsive, is sensitive, and is free of bias, so that test taker can actually be measured accurately based on either the curriculum they've gone through or based on the assessment that's been conducted. Despite the amount of energy and resources, that's been expended on test development, little or no attention has been, placed on the influence of item writers or factors that could influence, item writing. And so this study is actually to look at what are the possibility of interference of item writer characteristics on the item itself, and knowing fully well that in recent times there has been a discourse around developing culturally, responsive assessment. Although in the past, early in the late 20th century, there has been some discussions around culturally responsive measurement, but that actually, didn't materialize to anything significant. But in recent times, testing organizations has been looking at the possibility of developing, culturally responsive assessment, especially in standardized testing. And I believe that as researchers, one of the focus should be that we should be discussing is there an influence of item writer characteristics on some of the items that are being, developed for standardized assessment. Next slide, please. So to have a good understanding of why we feel there could be an influence of factors on the item writing, ability of item writers, we look at the theory that says the cultural historical activity, theory. And this theory is based on the premise that individuals, behave or do things based on their cultural backgrounds, beliefs, values, experiences, and looking at these characteristics, it is practically impossible to actually separate somebody from their history, from the environment they grew up, from their life experiences, and from learnings either formal or informal. And so, based on this premise, we believe that item writers are likely to be influenced in the process of writing items by their, history, interaction with the environment, their life experiences, their personal, characteristics such as personality characteristics. And so we feel it is important for research, in the field of psychometric and measurement to join this discussion to see if these characteristics actually influences item writers or item writing. Next slide. For this study, we actually conduct a survey using the Kotrick survey software. And for most participants, it would take about the average of 11 minutes to complete the survey. All the data were analyzed using the SPSS. We conduct both the descriptive and the inferential statistics. Participants in these studies were above the age of 18, and they completed the demographic aspects of the survey, as well as the personality questionnaire, the self-concept measure, and the item, writing importance survey. Next slide. Yeah, some of the demographics that we assess include questions about age, race, gender, nationality, the length of time that this individual have lived in the US, their native or first language, the highest degree that they have, the area of degree, the region where they live in, the most salient identity, reason for item writing, years of experience as item writers, and subject areas, as well as topic they engage in when it comes to item writing. We use the item writing importance questionnaires were actually developed by the researchers. And this has 15 items, and they were, assessed on a 5-point scale. While the 10-item personality inventory was developed by Goosley in 2003, and this has a 7-point, while the last survey that we used was the self-perception profile for adults. The original survey actually had 50 items, but for this particular study, we used the short version using just 30 of those items, resulting to about 8 subskills. Next slide, please. Yeah, this is a summary of the demographics based on results of the demographics. We can see that item writing activity or item writing profession is more dominated by male, and we have more whites, engaging in this activity than any other race or ethnicity. And when it comes to training, majority of people that respond to our survey actually receive formal training, about 64% of the population, while majority of them actually engage in this process on part-time basis. Why master's degree, as we can see, as the highest number of individuals. Most item writers only had highest, the population had master's degree, while about 16% are doctorate degrees. Next slide. Yeah, this is the summary of the mean and standard deviation of the scales that we used. For the item writer importance, the mean is about 54.08, while the mean age for this population is about 37 or 38 years old. While the extraversion, the TIPI scale for this particular sample does not really differ significantly from other samples that have been used for where the scale has been used. Right now, I will stop here and I will yield to Dr. Middleton to continue the presentation. Thank you.
All right, thank you, Benji. So on the right here, this is prior samples. So you can have that for comparison. Okay, so reliability analyses. So as a reminder, I think Benji said this, but we actually came up with items for the item writer importance scale. So we had to, we did a factor analysis. We also did, Cronbach's alpha, and we saw that overall it had an alpha of 0.94. And based on the factor analysis, there were 3 components that were actually developed, and that showed the item. Sorry, the scale could be divided into 3 different components. So those components, we looked at the reliabilities of those as well, and we see the alphas for the demographic was 95.95, for the experiences was 0.85, and for the characteristic subscale, it was 0.87. And then I saw the comment in the chat. I'm going to come back to that. I think that's going to be my last slide. So we also looked at the 10-item personality inventory, the TIPI. So this was 5 subscales that had 2 items each. So the author of the scale indicated that Cronbach's alpha is not the best reliability because for that scale and the subscales, because there are only 2 items. So we already know that the reliabilities are not going to be high. However, this scale is actually widely used because it's meant to be a very quick measure of the big 5. And test retest is the better reliability to do for this scale. However, since this is exploratory, we did not want to do test retest because that would mean that we would have to, know who the participants are and contact them again. So we just did not report the reliability. But as I mentioned, this scale is actually a widely used scale. So we felt comfortable continuing with it and using it in the analyses. However, not on this slide is the SPPA the one that Banji mentioned a couple of slides ago. And so this was a learning experience. And so the SPPA actually did not have high reliabilities. And there were enough items on each of the subscales for it to have had high reliability. But because we saw that the reliabilities were low, we did not use it. We removed it from the analyses. And then also, initially, we were kind of surprised, but when we went back and looked through the research, we saw that this scale has not really been used much. So that's something that I guess we kind of overlooked. So just as a, FYI for your future studies, and definitely your dissertation, make sure that the scale that even if the authors say that the scale is reliable, which was the case for the SPPA, the A is the adult version. There is a youth version that I think is more reliable, but the adult version, maybe not so much, but that could be why it hasn't been used. So make sure that you can find multiple articles that have utilized that scale, and also that the reliabilities are consistently above 0.7, I would say, or around there. All right, so the factor analysis. So we did an EFA for the item writer characteristic survey. This was, again, as a reminder, 15 items. We used PCA for extraction and ProMax for rotation because we felt that the components would be related to each other, and they were. The KMO was sufficient, Bartlett's was sufficient, so letting us know that, the factor analysis, we could proceed with it. And in the end, 3 factors were retained based on the scree plot as well as the eigenvalues. So there was consistent decision making there. And they accounted for 74.47% of the total variance. And these are the components. And it looks almost like simple structure with the exception of one item that loaded on 2 different components. So we tried to come up with some names for those components, and that's how we ended up on the previous slide with the reliability, saying that the first component kind of looks like, like characteristics of the item writer, like their gender, their race. And then the second component looks to be not necessarily characteristics, but more like their experiences, like their lived experiences, their years of experience, education level. I have the item is written in formal English highlighted because that one actually doesn't really fit, but it loaded on that component. And then the third component we came up with, those were actually the characteristics of the items, not the item writers. And there is that one that loads on component 1 and component 3. Could not figure out why items containing non-controversial topics would load on the characteristics of item writers in addition to the characteristic of the item. But this is what we obtained. Also, in looking at the reliability, because if you're like, oh, maybe that item should be removed, it's loading doubly. Looking at the reliability table, if that item was deleted, I think the reliability went down from 0.94 to 0.936, which means that we probably shouldn't remove it because it's not like that item is pulling the reliability down any. So I would leave it, and it just happens to load on 2 factors or components. So going to the ANOVA, so we looked at whether years of experience and highest education affected the how the person scored on the item writer characteristic scale. So about that scale, we asked those questions, and as Banji mentioned, they range from strongly disagree to strongly agree, I believe. And so the higher score was indicative of the person feeling that those characteristics were important to consider when writing items. So we see for years of experience, there is no statistical significance between years of experience. However, for highest education, we do see the p-value is significant. So doing a post hoc analysis showed us that master's degree recipients felt more things about the items were important in the item writing process than high school diploma and bachelor's recipients. So actually, and we see the means here. So basically, master's and doctoral degree recipients felt more strongly about, like maybe like the item being non-controversial or the item writer's lived experiences. They felt that those things were more important than those who wrote items who had a high school diploma or a bachelor's degree, which to me, that kind of makes sense because people who have a master's degree or a doctorate degree, they've probably taken at least one course that dealt with item writing. Even if you were not like a measurement major, if you were an education major and you were training to be a teacher, you had to have an assessment course or some course. So you have a little more knowledge about, you know, why maybe certain things are important when you're writing items. So the regression analysis, we looked at whether those subscales of the TIPI predicted the importance of item writer characteristics. And we see that emotional stability, conscientiousness, and extroversion had significant p-values, and emotional stability is the only negative one. So the more emotionally stable the person was, the less importance they placed on those characteristics in item writing. But conscientiousness and extroversion, those were positive relationships. So those who were more conscientious or who were more extroverted actually felt that more characteristics were important when considering the item writing process. So we did a t-test just to see if there were any gender differences. And actually, we did a t-test for the other variables as well. Whether you had formal training in item writing or not. And there was another one that was only 2 levels. But the only one that was significant was the gender one. Males scored higher on the item writer importance scale than females, meaning that males actually believe that more characteristics were important in the item writing process than females. All right, so in summary, all right, so Benji, do you want to say a little about that first bullet, validating the item writing scale using Rush?
Yeah, we plan to validate the item writer scale using Rush model and be able to see how the distribution of difficulty in this population, as well as find out how well the rating scale for this particular scale function in this population. That one will give us an idea if we should retain the rating scale or perhaps collapse some and be able to make the survey more better for people to use. Yeah.
All right, thank you. Also, we want to repeat this study because there are some limitations. So one of the limitations is that we ended up using Qualtrics panel because as I mentioned, we had been working on this study for over a year and we were not getting any participants. So I decided to go with Qualtrics panel, and in the beginning, I think we had, I think it was like 1 female to 11 males and 1 Black person to 11 white people. So we ended up going with Qualtrics, and I believe Qualtrics panel, and I believe the reason why the demographics turned out the way they were is because, and I tried to go back and look at my receipt, but they didn't have it broken down. I can't find it anywhere in Qualtrics. They have quota, there's a quota thing, and it's like a set by default. And I think I moved it, if I remember correctly, a little bit. But I think that's why we ended up getting as many Blacks, Hispanics, as well as females, because like I said, initially, when we were trying to do it on our own, we were just not getting, I was like, oh. So, but I mean, I do know that there are more men, male item writers. That's what anecdotally we think. But I think this study kind of showed that. But if we repeat this study, I don't want to have any quotas on it. I want to just, let the data come out as it may. And so, yeah, sample demographics, that kind of goes along with that. So the significance of this study, as I mentioned, this is, we haven't found much on item writers, item writing. When we were preparing this to go through IRB, like we had to put like a justification and like background of the study, and we just weren't finding a lot of information out there. So we saw that there was a void, hence this study. And I don't know, I kind of did it subtly. But on each slide, there was a person of different race, ethnicities, disability status. So we would like to, and then this picture right here, we would like for the item writers to look like all of the slides and this picture. However, we are not seeing that to be the case currently. So that is just something that we would like to remind everyone and encourage everyone on this call that there is a need for diversity in the field. So I want all of you to consider that, as well as tell your friends. So that actually concludes our presentation. So thank you very much. Are there any questions? I saw a couple things in the chat.
I have
Actually, you can go.
Go ahead. No.
Oh yeah, I was just gonna ask first, well, it's two main questions. The first was just if you had any plans to extend this with like some qualitative questions to kind of figure out why some of these items might be loading, because I was thinking, for example, whether or not you think a question is controversial probably would differ based on your background. And the second is, how do you even become an item writer?
Yeah, two great questions. So yeah, actually in the original IRB application, we did say that this was going to be a mixed method study, and we were going to do some qualitative analyses. However, given that we weren't getting very many responses, we kind of, that's why we took that out. And then also why we shortened the SPPA from 50 items to 30 items, because we're like, maybe if it's shorter, we'll get more participants. So that is something that would be for future study. And then as far as your item writing question, I don't know, is there anyone on the call who is an item writer? I do know some people, we hosted at Howard, we have for the past 2 or 3 years, an AP session during the summer. And I know some of those AP instructors and attendees are item writers for different testing companies, but I don't know like how they actually got into it other than word of mouth. But are there any item writers on the call?
Maria is.
Yeah, I'm not an item writer, but I hire them. I've hired them in the past. So if you want to become an item writer, you can contact me and I'll give you some connections on who to send your resume to, depending on what it is that you want to write and what your subject matter expertise is. Yeah, I've worked in many companies where I've hired lots and lots of writers. So let me know if you're interested and I'll hook you up with some people.
Sounds like a great synergy for the research. I have a question around the Qualtrics panel. I'm currently trying to do data collection, and I tried to do social media recruitment, and I had an influx of scammers who were after the incentive. And so I'm interested to know if you can share what that experience was like. I know you said you struggled to get participants, and then also just thinking about what kind of quality control can you do to make sure that the people who respond to your survey or your tool are indeed item writers?
Yeah, so I guess the good thing with this survey is there was no like monetary incentive. So that helps, but also if you're collecting data, it doesn't help because, you know, people want incentives. But we've seen, you know, at Howard, we've seen students who have, and I'm also on the IRB, have run into that issue of, you know, like scammers. So I would say, so Qualtrics panel is much cheaper than it was 2 years ago, maybe 2 or 3 years ago, when they did not have Qualtrics panel. I just found out about it for this study, actually, because in the past they had like a minimum of $2,500. Like it was just a flat rate minimum of $2,500 that they would charge you to, and I forgot, it wasn't even a lot of people that I requested. But with Qualtrics panel, it's much cheaper. I think it was like $400, but that was because I had those criteria. Some, you know, like I wanted specifically item writers, or I forgot what the criteria were. But there is in Qualtrics, you can do it on your own, but definitely they did it with the panel. There's something called the recapture or CAPTCHA score. And it ranges from 0 to 1, and anything less than 0.5 is considered, they say, they flag it as a bot. There are certain, I guess, like criteria that they look at to, you know, kind of determine if it's a bot or not. And there were some in this study that were 0.5 or lower. And so I kind of just looked at those to see. And also you can look at the duration. If someone is completing it in a minute, you know it can't be completed in 1 minute reliably anyway. So kind of remove all of those, you know, where it's like, it's probably like some programmer or something. But yeah, those are the, and there's a debate about whether you should have that question in the middle that says select strongly, or not strongly agree, because you wouldn't put that, select, I don't know, moderately agree for this item, to kind of help you know if the person was paying attention or not. But those are some things to look for.
Thank you. That was really helpful.
You're welcome.
I know it seems unrelated to what you're doing, but I think this is beautiful work. This is what we need to sort of take the veil off of how this measurement happens. And so really thinking about who these item writers are and what they bring. Like, I think it's a really important study.
Yeah, thank you. So, Jaylene, I think I might be pronouncing that. Definitely reach out to Maria. She can give you some connects.
Okay,
I
sorry,
wanted
I was trying to quickly just turn my mic and my camera on, but yes, I can definitely reach out to her because I've just been having that trouble with getting through the door. Like, I'm not as worried about my qualifications. I know I can do it, but it's more about getting other people to see me as someone who can fit these roles. So I can definitely reach out to her. Thank you.
I'm gonna put my email in the chat for you guys.
And Jaylene, you said you did, so you were at ETS this summer? I think that's where
But
Benji
yeah,
was.
I did the internship with ETS, and I was actually with Benji on the NAEP project as well.
Okay. So yeah, stay in touch with the ETS folks.
Of course. Thank you.
Oh, I got my foot in the door. I did the summer internship, And then I ended up doing the postdoc for 2 years, and I'm actually still working with with people at ETS now, many years later.
I also wonder, Dr. Middleton, if another approach, again, to make sure that we actually get people who are item writers would be to recruit from companies that hire item writers.
What do you mean recruit from companies?
So in terms of like people who fill in your survey, like you would want someone who has access to item writers to ask them to fill your survey, as opposed to, because I don't know, I know that panels get us the data quickly, but I'm just like, I don't.
We tried that. Benji definitely he reached out to some folks and they just were not responding.
Yeah.
Mm.
Yeah. So I don't know, maybe it was a year ago. So I mean, I think we should have been over COVID fatigue by then. All the surveys that were out then. But yeah, we tried. And we posted on LinkedIn, like I know some people who work at testing companies. Banji reached out to, I think maybe there was a conference or something, and yeah, we still didn't get much traction. So
The challenges of data collection.
yes, this specific, this very specific demographic. No other questions? Well, thank y'all.
I have a survey that I'd like everybody to complete if you can, just to give us some feedback on the session. So I sent that in the chat. This also has been recorded and we're going to start putting the recordings on YouTube. So I'm also going to put the link to the previous professional development session in the chat there if you missed the session with Dr. Soul. But please fill out that survey. Thank you, everybody. If you have any more questions, we do have some more time. It's a good opportunity.
Ramona, would you
All
mind
right.
repeating that? We couldn't hear you.
I think she might have just been accidentally unmuted because she just joined. Okay.
Thank you so much, Dr. Middleton, and thank you so much, Banji. This was just a wealth of knowledge. So thank you as always, and thank you for all that you do for the CMJ community. Bye, everyone.